What if the woman who spent her whole life chasing status and power ends up losing everything in the most humiliating way possible? In Bridgerton Season 4, Part 2, Araminta believes she has finally destroyed Sophie forever. But the truth is, her own secrets are about to destroy her instead. And when the Bridgertons step in, the downfall that follows is not just shocking, it is devastating. Before we dive in, don't forget to like and subscribe, because the twists coming in this story are bigger than anyone expected. By the time we reach Part 2 of the story, Araminta is more confident than ever. She truly believes she has won. For years, she has controlled everyone around her using fear, manipulation, and social pressure. Sophie has always been her easiest target, the girl she treated like a servant, the girl she tried to erase from existence. And now, after accusing Sophie of theft, Araminta feels certain that Sophie's life is finally ruined for good. In her mind, this is justice. In reality, this is the beginning of her biggest mistake. What makes this situation so dangerous for Araminta is not just the accusation itself, but the arrogance behind it. She underestimates how many people Sophie has quietly touched with her kindness. She assumes no one powerful will care enough to intervene. But she forgets one very important truth. The Bridgertons protect their own. And once Benedict becomes involved, the entire balance of power begins to shift. At first, Araminta still feels untouchable. Society continues to see her as a respectable widow with connections and status. She has spent years carefully building this image, hiding financial struggles, hiding lies about inheritance, and most importantly, hiding the truth about Sophie's dowry. That hidden money is the secret she never expects to be exposed. She believed she could keep it forever without consequences. But secrets in high society never stay buried for long. Meanwhile, Sophie is facing her darkest moment. Being accused publicly is already humiliating, but the emotional pain goes much deeper. This is not just about prison or scandal, it is about betrayal. Sophie once hoped that Araminta might show even a small amount of care toward her, especially after Lord Penwood's death. Instead, Araminta became colder, harsher, and more cruel. The accusation proves something Sophie has feared for years. Araminta does not just dislike her, she wants her gone completely. This emotional breaking point is important because it changes Sophie. Until now, she has survived through patience and endurance. She tolerated insults. She accepted unfair treatment. She tried to stay invisible. But Part 2 shows a shift inside her. Pain slowly transforms into strength. And that transformation is what ultimately leads to Araminta's downfall. At the same time, Benedict is beginning to understand the full truth about Sophie's past. His feelings for her are no longer just fascination or attraction. They are becoming protective and deeply personal. The more he learns about what Sophie has suffered, the more determined he becomes to fight for her. This determination creates a direct conflict with Araminta because for the first time, someone powerful is standing against her authority. But the most dangerous opponent Araminta will face is not Benedict. It is Violet Bridgerton. Violet represents everything Araminta fears: influence, intelligence, and social respect that cannot be manipulated easily. When Violet begins asking questions, small cracks start forming in Araminta's carefully built world. Questions about the will, questions about money, questions about Sophie's true status. Araminta tries to maintain control, but panic begins growing beneath the surface. Because deep down, she knows the truth. If the truth comes out, she does not just lose an argument. She loses everything. And that is exactly where Part 2 is heading. As Part 2 unfolds, the tension around Araminta grows thicker with every passing day. What she once thought was untouchable social power now begins to crumble under the weight of secrets she can no longer control. Violet Bridgerton, ever observant and sharp, starts piecing together inconsistencies in Araminta's carefully constructed life. Small remarks from society ladies, hushed whispers in the drawing rooms, and Sophie's own quiet dignity form a trail that leads directly to Araminta's lies. Each discovery is a silent threat, and while society may still publicly praise her, behind closed doors, suspicion begins to grow. Every glance from an influential figure now feels like an accusation. Every polite nod feels like judgment. The confidence that once made Araminta untouchable starts to falter, replaced by anxiety and fear. Meanwhile, Sophie's own story takes a powerful turn. Though she has endured years of manipulation and humiliation, Part 2 showcases the emergence of her inner strength. The prison accusation, intended to break her, instead ignites something within her, a fierce determination to reclaim her life. She is no longer just a victim waiting for rescue. With Benedict's unwavering support, Sophie begins to assert herself, calmly but firmly challenging every falsehood Araminta has planted against her. Each truth she reveals chips away at Araminta's credibility, and every small victory in Sophie's favor increases the tension. The audience feels it viscerally, the sense that a reckoning is imminent. Araminta's reaction to these cracks in her world is a study in desperation. Her pride, which once seemed impervious, becomes her greatest vulnerability. She lashes out in subtle manipulations, trying to twist situations to her advantage, but every move is met with resistance. Violet's presence is the ultimate pressure point. She doesn't just question Araminta, she scrutinizes her behavior and motives, exposing contradictions that society cannot ignore. Letters that were meant to remain private are read by the wrong people. Intentions are misinterpreted in ways Araminta cannot control, and allies she thought loyal begin to hesitate. The very network she depended on to maintain her status now feels like a trap. Adding to the drama, the tension between Araminta and her daughters reaches a boiling point. Rosamond, although still somewhat under her mother's control, begins to see the cracks in Araminta's authority. Posey, the daughter long treated as inferior and overlooked, becomes a silent symbol of defiance. Every kind gesture Posey extends to Sophie, small acts of compassion Araminta cannot tolerate, becomes evidence of her own moral failure. Araminta's harsh treatment of Posey, once unquestioned, now becomes a glaring fault line. The audience senses the inevitability. A mother who controls through fear will be undone by those she thought powerless. Finally, the seeds of Araminta's public unraveling are planted when Violet uncovers the truth about Sophie's dowry. Araminta, who believed she had stolen and concealed it successfully, suddenly faces a threat she cannot counter with pride or manipulation. The dowry, a symbol of legal and social legitimacy, shifts power to Sophie, undermining Araminta's years of control. What seemed like an unassailable position, a woman untouchable in her societal role, begins to crumble. The tension is palpable. Every word, every glance, every whispered conversation in high society now carries the potential to expose her. And in Part 2, the audience watches as the walls Araminta built around herself begin to crack, signaling the start of a downfall more crushing than any punishment she could have imagined. By now, the tension surrounding Araminta has escalated to a near breaking point. Every encounter, every conversation, every glance from the Bridgertons or the wider social circle feels like a trap waiting to snap. Araminta's once impenetrable confidence is replaced by nervous calculation. She tries to manipulate, charm, and intimidate, but nothing works. Violet's investigation has been meticulous, and the evidence of her misdeeds, her cruelty towards Sophie, her lies about the dowry, her favoritism, and harsh treatment of her own daughters, cannot be hidden any longer. Araminta's world, which she has carefully curated to display wealth, power, and influence, now feels fragile, teetering on the edge of exposure. The audience can sense that her social downfall is no longer a question of if, but when. Sophie, on the other hand, begins to transform from a victim into a formidable force. The injustice she endured has ignited a fire within her. No longer willing to endure humiliation silently, she starts asserting herself with calm determination. Benedict, always a pillar of support, not only shields her from social attacks, but also empowers her to confront them. Every small victory she gains over Araminta is magnified by the shock and outrage of society. Witnessing Sophie reclaim agency over her life is deeply satisfying for the audience. Her quiet dignity, long overshadowed by Araminta's cruelty, becomes a weapon more powerful than any social standing Araminta could boast. Araminta's response to this shift is pure panic. She lashes out in private moments, showing a side of her cruelty previously unseen. Yet, these desperate measures only accelerate her collapse. Letters meant to remain secret are intercepted. Whispered suspicions spread faster than she can control, and her social allies begin to hesitate in their loyalty. Even Rosamond, who has long benefited from her mother's favoritism, begins to question her actions. Posy's small acts of kindness towards Sophie, once dismissed as inconsequential, now highlight Araminta's moral failings. Her daughters, though not openly defiant, become mirrors reflecting her flaws, which society begins to notice. Every slight, every misstep is now magnified in the unforgiving eyes of the Ton. The exposure of Sophie's dowry becomes a turning point. What Araminta believed to be a secret she could wield as power is suddenly leveraged against her. Violet's intervention ensures that Sophie is recognized as socially legitimate, undermining Araminta's control completely. This revelation sets off a chain reaction. Accusations of theft collapse under scrutiny, the dowry returns to Sophie's hands, and Araminta's manipulation is publicly invalidated. Her carefully cultivated reputation, built over years of deception and control, begins to unravel in real time. The audience feels the tension ratchet higher with each moment, knowing that a social reckoning is imminent. Araminta's public unraveling begins subtly at first. Small whispers at social gatherings, curious glances from influential figures, and a growing sense that something is amiss. But as Sophie begins to reclaim her place in society, the cracks widen. Araminta's temper flares, her usual composure falters, and her manipulations no longer produce the results she expects. Every lie she has told, every act of cruelty she has committed, every slight against Sophie and Posy now contributes to her growing isolation. Society starts to turn its gaze toward her, and the woman who once seemed untouchable begins to realize that she is powerless. By the end of this section, Araminta is no longer in control. The tension reaches a fever pitch. The woman who sought to dominate Sophie and her daughters is now at the mercy of the very people she tried to control. The audience is left on the edge of their seats, anticipating the next move, knowing that her final humiliation and complete social collapse are only moments away. The seeds for her downfall have been planted meticulously, and the reckoning is inevitable. The moment that the audience has been waiting for finally arrives, the confrontation between Sophie and Araminta. After years of manipulation, cruelty, and oppression, Sophie no longer hides her anger or her strength. She has endured insults, humiliation, and even false imprisonment, but now she stands ready to fight for herself and her dignity. Araminta, still clinging to the illusion of power, believes she can intimidate Sophie one final time. She underestimates the fire that has been quietly building inside the girl she thought she could control forever. What follows is both shocking and inevitable. The first real, public challenge to Araminta's authority. This confrontation is electric, fueled by years of resentment and injustice. Sophie calmly confronts Araminta with the truth. Every lie, every act of cruelty, and every attempt to manipulate society against her is laid bare. Violet Bridgerton's influence amplifies the moment, ensuring that society cannot ignore what is happening. Whispers ripple through the crowd, curious glances turn to pointed stares, and Araminta begins to feel the weight of exposure pressing down on her. This is not just a private humiliation, it is a social reckoning. Every carefully maintained facade cracks under scrutiny, revealing the cruelty that Araminta tried so desperately to hide. The most devastating blow comes when Sophie reveals the truth about her dowry. The money, which Araminta tried to steal and use to assert control, now belongs to Sophie. In one moment, the foundation of Araminta's power, the leverage she thought she had over Sophie and society, crumbles completely. The room senses the reversal immediately. A woman who once ruled through fear and intimidation now faces disbelief, anger, and judgment from every corner of her social circle. The audience can feel the tension. Araminta's status, her influence, and her reputation are all hanging by a thread. Araminta's daughters, long caught in the shadow of their mother's cruelty, are also witnesses to this humiliation. Rosamond, who has benefited from Araminta's favoritism, begins to see her mother in a new light. Posy, the daughter once treated as insignificant and inadequate, stands proudly beside Sophie, embodying the kindness and courage Araminta has always scorned. The contrast is stark. The daughters Araminta tried to control are no longer tools. They are witnesses, participants, and symbols of her failure. Every word, every expression, every action highlights how far Araminta has fallen. The public nature of this confrontation ensures that Araminta's humiliation is more than personal. It is vie. In high society, reputation is everything, and the revelation of her deceit, cruelty, and selfishness destroys the carefully constructed image she spent years cultivating. Conversations in drawing rooms, whispers at balls, and reports in Lady Whistledown's columns begin to spread the news. Araminta realizes, perhaps for the first time, that no amount of manipulation or status can shield her from the consequences of her actions. The very world she sought to control now views her as a cautionary tale. By the end of this section, the audience feels the full weight of Araminta's downfall. She is no longer untouchable. The woman who once held power over Sophie, Posey, and even parts of London society finds herself isolated, disbelieved, and exposed. Her authority, carefully nurtured over decades, has crumbled in moments. Suspense is at its peak, leaving the audience breathless as they anticipate the final stages of her social exile. The seeds of her ruin have grown into an unstoppable force, and nothing will be the same again. The final chapter of Araminta's story, in Season 4, Part 2, is one of complete social exile and humbling consequences. After the public confrontation, whispers of her cruelty and deception spread like wildfire through London society. Her carefully cultivated reputation, once untouchable, is shattered beyond repair. Invitations stop arriving, alliances dissolve, and the circles she once dominated begin to turn away. Araminta's influence, the very thing she spent her life obsessing over, is gone. She is no longer feared, admired, or respected. She is isolated, a figure of disgrace in the eyes of those whose approval she once craved. For someone like Araminta, who defined herself through status and control, this is worse than any punishment or physical humiliation could ever be. Meanwhile, Sophie emerges stronger than ever. The woman who endured years of cruelty now stands as a symbol of resilience and justice. With her dowry restored and her social legitimacy confirmed, she reclaims her rightful place in society. But more importantly, Sophie gains dignity and freedom, the ability to live without fear of Araminta's manipulations. Benedict's support provides both emotional reassurance and a clear path forward, cementing their connection. The audience experiences a deep sense of satisfaction seeing Sophie rise from victim to victor, knowing that her endurance and integrity have finally been rewarded. Posey, too, finds a measure of liberation. Once neglected and belittled by Araminta, she now has the chance to flourish in an environment that values kindness and character over appearance and status. Her courage in quietly supporting Sophie throughout Araminta's scheme marks her as a heroine in her own right. The contrast between the way she and her mother are treated in this final section is stark. Where Araminta faces isolation and humiliation, Posey finds acceptance, warmth, and the possibility of a future unshadowed by cruelty. The audience can see clearly that morality, empathy, and compassion ultimately triumph over manipulation and vanity. Araminta herself, stripped of her power and facing the consequences of her actions, experiences the ultimate reckoning. No amount of wealth, connections, or arrogance can save her from the social exile she now endures. She leaves London quietly, a shadow of the formidable woman she once appeared to be. The humiliation is complete, not in prison or physical harm, but in losing the very world she defined herself by. For someone whose life revolved around controlling others, this loss of status and influence is devastating. It is a quiet, lingering punishment, and in its own way, far more satisfying than any dramatic downfall could be. The Bridgertons, especially Violet, emerge as the force that ensures justice is served without unnecessary violence or spectacle. Their wisdom, foresight, and determination allow Sophie and Posey to find safety, dignity, and happiness, while Araminta's manipulations are fully exposed. Society watches, learns, and ultimately validates the triumph of good over cruelty. In the end, Part 2 provides a powerful lesson. Those who abuse power and manipulate others for selfish ends may appear untouchable but worth it.